leadership. I have a podcast called the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast, as well as do a Wednesday night show called the Lawyer's Emotional Intelligence Book Club. And so what I'm happy to do this morning is to take the podcast live. So one of my big fans, or I'm a big fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. Good morning, Ken. How are you doing? So yeah, one of my big idols is Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm going through his book called Crushing It. And what he talks about is, personal branding. And on my podcast, the Lawyer Lifestyle Podcast, we're all about, how to develop your personal brand, how to distribute your personal brand. And what I love to do is something that Tim Ferriss does so well, which is to learn a concept and try it as an example. And so what we talked about yesterday on the podcast is essentially trying to develop one big piece of content and then distributing it among the various podcast platforms. So that's what I'm going to try to do with this podcast, with this video show. I'm going to try to go live every day at around 8 a.m. Central Time. Of course, things will come up, but I'm glad to answer any sort of legal questions you might have. I'm happy to answer questions about, what it's like to be a lawyer. If you're a young lawyer, I'm glad to answer mentoring type questions. And so why don't we get started with the material, and would love to, hear your questions and your comments as we go along. We should be live on YouTube, Twitch. We're live on Instagram, also live on some of my Facebook platforms as well. So good morning to all. And so let's dive into the material for today. So what we talked about yesterday is sort of developing the content, right? And so and we talked about all of the pillars that go into, or the principles for why and how you develop a personal brand. Well, today we're going to talk about, or we're going to start talking about things that hold you back. And so, there's this formula that Gary Vee put together, intent, authenticity, passion, patience, speed, work ethic, ability to get attention, mastering the social platforms. All of these things come right out of Gary Vee's Crushing It book. But there's some things that hold us back. And there's a lot of reasons, a lot of excuses that people make, and I made these excuses for years, right? For why. Yes, I mean I did a form of this video show in the past, but never really did something as big or put them on so many different platforms in a live version before. And so there's a lot of different reasons. But today what we're going to talk about is the fear of failure. And, everyone should know that the way that Gary Vee put together this book is he basically, he has the principles that he talks about all the time. And he put those principles in a book called Crush It, right? It was, many, many years ago, it was sort of the formation of his principles. And so what Crushing It essentially does is it updates the book Crush It, and then it adds in basically people who have been doing his principles, right? So they figured it out, they got motivated, and they did it. So maybe they put together a podcast, but essentially they built a personal brand around their business, and then they monetized it. And so what everyone should know is, and Gary Vee says this in his book, is that, all of these people started from basically nothing. They were, just like you. They didn't have a personal brand. They could not figure out how to do it, and they read Gary Vee's book, and they're like, wow, there's so many things that I could be doing, right? And so they monetized it, and he has these examples in the book, right? So essentially the message is that if you're not building your personal brand, it's because you're not ready to do it, or there are things that are holding you back. So we're going to go through some of these obstacles in the next several episodes. The first is fear of failure. So, yeah, most people fear failure as lawyers. One of the things that we hate doing is losing. Right? We hate losing to our opponents. We hate losing to the other side. We hate failing in many ways. We hate when we lose, bar association elections. We think everything is the end of the world. But really what it is it may not be fear of failure necessarily, as Gary Vee talks about in this book. It may actually be fear of disappointing people. So whether that's, your fear of disappointing yourself, you fear disappointing family, you fear disappointing your spouse, your kids, you fear disappointing, maybe your law partner, so many people, right? And so at the end of the day, what Gary Vee says is ignore those voices. Commit to ignoring every single voice that threatens to undermine you. And I know that's very hard to do. It's very hard, especially, and I talked about this on one of my episodes of the Laura's Emotional Intelligence Book Club. There's going to be lots of haters out there, especially when you start to get big and you start to, make money off of what you're doing, make money off your personal brand. There's going to be a ton of haters out there. There's going to be people who are going to, there'll be people who are going to write nasty comments on your live stream. There's going to be people who, send you nasty emails or make nasty comments on your posts. I see that all the time with anybody who is doing live streaming, that sort of thing. And hey, I want to say hi to the commenter on Twitch. How's it going? So building your personal brand is tough because you gotta face your fears. You gotta face possibly disappointing people. What Gary Vee actually says, the one person you can't ignore on this issue is your spouse, which, I totally agree with. You have to be on the same page as as your spouse or your partner, whoever you're living with, because it's really the only person that you have to make sure that you plan with and that, they're on board as well. But everyone else, you have to just ignore and, put out of your mind. You have to be your own judge and jury, is what Gary Vee says, which is so true, because only you know where you want to go. Only you are going to be able to, reach your goals. Only you know where you want to go. And as, Grant Cardone talks about all the time, you make your own economy. Yeah, I mean, there's maybe a recession out there. Maybe there's, unemployment. But at the end of the day, you're the only person that can satisfy your own expectations. So really, to sum up what I think what we want to talk about today is, no one who played it safe ever made it big. That's a quote from Gary Vee's book. Unless you're willing to take a risk, unless you're willing to be bigger than yourself, to get out of yourself and don't worry about the fears of disappointing others. What about disappointing yourself, right? What about, you have goals in your life, you have things that you want to do. What about you don't disappoint yourself. Make your life what you want it to be. I saw a very interesting TED Talk yesterday, and I'm going to try to get her on the podcast for the Legal Power Players interview that I try to do every Tuesday. And it was interesting because, she talks about how, what her life was like. And a lot of lawyers feel this way. And I felt like this in the past, where you have people who, go to law school, they do great things, and then they identify themselves as a lawyer. That's the only way that they identify themselves. And so if they lose a case or they lose a client or something bad happens in their legal practice, then their life goes downhill because they don't have a life. They don't identify themselves other than being a lawyer. And so that's why it's so important. That's why, I really say, when you're developing your personal brand, think about other things that you do other than being a lawyer and try to build your personal brand on that. Whether that's something like gaming or music or, scrapbooking, whatever it is. You got to find time to do the things that you love and take care of yourself, or you're just going to be sort of that typical, stereotypical, attorney who drinks too much and works too hard. There's more to life than that. So building your personal brand allows you to delve into parts of yourself that are not legal related, right? You're a lawyer, you work hard, but there's got to be other things, other parts of your life, whether that's family, whether that's friends, whether that's a sport that you enjoy. So at the end of the day, I think lawyers make a lot of excuses for why we don't build a personal brand. And one of them is, I don't want to disappoint, people in my family. I don't want to, take a risk and, maybe say something that I don't mean. And then, I lose my license. We always go to extremes as lawyers, right? We always go a little too, at the end of the road, we're going to lose our license. We're going to be unemployed, all of that kind of stuff. What Gary Vee says in the book is that there's really very little that you can't recover from when you say things online, which is very true. Now, don't get me wrong. If you say something very, sort of like outrageous and, there are things that can happen, and we are all bound by ethical rules. We're all bound by the Supreme Court rules of the state that we live in and that we practice. But there's a lot of things that you can do, within those rules. So developing your personal brand will really allow you to get you to where you want to be, and to be able to build a practice that you enjoy. So unless there's really any sort of, further discussion today, thanks for joining me. I'm going to try to go live every day at 8 a.m. Central to maybe provide some, number one, to work on, branding, work on marketing, sales, and leadership. And of course, if you have any, legal related questions, if you have any, if you're a young lawyer and you have questions about, how to practice, I'll be here to answer those in the comments as well. So, of course, if you have questions, feel free to leave them in the comments to these videos, and I'll be looking at that as well. And that's it. So have a great day, and remember to fight for the lifestyle that you want and become the rainmaker that you need to be. Take care.